Okay, we are going to go over how to find the missing angle measure. Um, we went over our trig ratios on that last lesson. So now basically you guys are going to have a triangle. And with that triangle, they're going to give you two side lengths, which will allow you to find a missing angle that they are looking for. Essentially, if you guys know two side lengths of a triangle and it is a right triangle, that means that you can find any angle on here that you want. That's what trigonometry will allow you to do. Okay, so right now we know we have a right triangle. I've got two side lengths. I don't know what either of these angles are. Okay, our goal for this question is they want to know what is the measure of theta. Okay, so we're trying to figure out what is this angle equal. So there's a list of steps for what we're going to need to do and some questions that you guys need to ask yourself. The first thing that you guys need to do on this problem is you need to identify what information about this you know. Okay, so starting out, always want to refer to our opposite, hypotenuse, and adjacent. So I'm going to go to this triangle here. I'm going to start at my theta and draw over. Across from our theta, remember, is our opposite angle. I'm going to go to my 90-degree angle, draw over to the 20. That's my hypotenuse. Okay, that means that my adjacent side is left over. Okay, so when I ask the question, identify what I know about this triangle. Okay, put your trig hats on. We're thinking trig vocabulary. What do we know about this triangle? Well, I know that my opposite side is 16, and I know that my hypotenuse is 20. So what do I know about this trig triangle? Well, I know the opposite, and I know the hypotenuse. That's what I know about it. Okay? Number 2 says, recall what trig function uses these sides. So if you guys see opposite and hypotenuse, we're thinking back to our SOHCAHTOA. Whoops, that's supposed to be an H. SOHCAHTOA. Okay, so if I'm thinking back to SOHCAHTOA, what does opposite and hypotenuse mean for me? Well, opposite and hypotenuse means that I need to use my sine function. Okay, so now that I've identified all that, I'm going to recall sine theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. Sine theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, so I'm going to go through then. I'm just going to plug in the information that I know. Sine theta, remember theta is a variable, so theta is like x. Sine theta equals opposite, which is 16, over hypotenuse, which is 20. Okay? Now, we've gone over this when we did our logarithm functions. A lot of you guys, you're trying to get theta by itself. That's our variable. A lot of you guys are going to say, oh, we divide by sine. Sine is not multiplication. That's not sine times theta. Okay? You cannot divide by sine to get rid of it. We have to use the inverse of the sine function. We have to use our inverse of sine. Now, this is going to look a little bit different, but the inverse of sine is going to be written as sine negative 1. Okay? So when I do a sine negative 1 of sine, those two things will cancel and leave you with a theta. Okay? The issue is, though, if I do sine negative 1 to one side of my equation, what do I have to do to the other side of the equation? Well, I also have to do sine negative 1 of the other side of the equation. So we've got the inverse of sine of 16 over 20. Okay, now how do we figure this out? Those of you guys that are at home and you guys have your own scientific calculators or graphing calculators, you guys already have sine negative 1. There's a sine negative 1 button on there. It'll be on your sine button, and you'll have to hit second. If you look above the sine button on your calculator, you'll see a sine negative 1. So if you hit second sine, that will pop up. Okay? If you do not have a calculator at home, I have some options for you. Okay? If you guys Google, okay, and all I did was I Googled scientific calculator. If you Google scientific calculator -Desmos should pop up. If that doesn't pop up, you might have to add in Desmos up here, but it should pop up, scientific calculator Desmos. Click on our scientific calculator Desmos and this will pop up. Okay? There is also an app. Okay? If you guys search Desmos Scientific Calculator on your phone, there is a calculator app that you could download as well. Okay? Either one of those will work to help you guys solve these problems. Okay? So, I need to do sine negative 1. Now, if I look, excuse me, sine is not what we want to use here. We need to use sine of negative 1. So I'm going to have to click on the function tab. And when I do that, that's where my sine negative 1 will show up. So I'm going to hit sine negative 1. Okay, and it's sine -1 of 16 over 20. Okay, and I don't even have to press enter. I can, but if you guys look, it shows your answer on this side here. We press enter. There we go. So sine -1 of 16 over 20 is 53.13, blah, 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 blah. I think on your homework it says to round it to the nearest degree, so you can just do 53. Okay, so if we go back here, and I go back to my actual tab that's open, I can write, after I use my calculator, theta equals 53 degrees. Okay, and that's how we found the measure of our missing angle. All right, let's do a couple more examples. Okay, for some of you guys, when you do your problems like this on your homework, it's going to be a good idea to write out these steps like I did. I know, which means use. Okay, because that's what we're going to be thinking in our head as we're working through these. So starting out on this first one, remember, first you have to identify opposite, hypotenuse, and adjacent. Opposite my theta. Opposite my 90-degree angle is my hypotenuse, which means that this is my adjacent. So what do I know about this triangle? Well, I know my adjacent side is 8, so I know adjacent. I know that my hypotenuse is 12, so I know my hypotenuse. I'm not writing all that out. Okay, I'm thinking back to our SOHCAHTOA. Okay, so SOHCAHTOA. If I see adjacent and hypotenuse tells me that I'm going to be using my cosine. Okay, so I'm going to write that function out. Cosine theta equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Remember, cosine theta equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay, so I got cosine theta equals adjacent over hypotenuse. I'm going to fill that in. Cosine theta equals adjacent is 8 over my hypotenuse, which I need to fill in because I know that my hypotenuse is 12. Okay, now again, I'm trying to get theta by itself. I've got to get rid of that cosine. I cannot divide by cosine. I have to use the inverse. So I can do cosine -1. Cosine -1 will cancel those. But I have to do that same thing to the other side of the equation. So I end up with theta equals cosine -1 of 8 over 12. Cosine -1 of 8 over 12. Okay, I'll pull up my calculator. And I'm going to enter in. I got to go to function because I need my cosine -1 of 8 over 12. Okay, and I've got my answer, 48.18. So rounding, if I round it to the nearest degree, I would just leave that as 48. Okay, so I could say that theta equals 48 degrees. That's what my angle is. Okay? Next triangle. Start with my opposite. Opposite of our reference angle is our opposite. Opposite the 90-degree angle is my hypotenuse. The side that's left over is my adjacent. So what do I know about this? Well, I know my opposite side is 21. And I know that my adjacent side, I'm just going to abbreviate, ADJ. Okay, I know that that is 19. I don't know what my hypotenuse is. I could find my hypotenuse if I did the Pythagorean theorem, but I don't know what it is, so I don't need it. Opposite, adjacent. That's what I've got. Okay, so if you see opposite and adjacent, O and A, that means we're going to need to use our tangent function. Okay, so I'm going to fill out my tangent function here. Okay, that's tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. Tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. Okay, I'm going to fill in my information. Tan theta equals, my opposite is 21. My adjacent is 19. I've got to get rid of that tan, so I need to use its inverse function, tan -1. Cancel, cancel. Got to do the same thing on this side, tan -1. So I've got theta equals tan -1 of 21 over 19. tan negative 1 of 21 over 19. So I'm going to go back. We'll figure out what that equals. So we've got to go again to function, tan negative 1, and it is going to be 21 over 19. And when I do that, I get 47.8. So 47.8, I could round that up to 48 for this one here. So theta equals 48 degrees. Okay, so we've done an example with sine, done an example with cosine, done an example with tangent. Okay, should have an example for each of you guys here. Okay, the next thing that I want you guys to do is here on this next page, here on this next page here, okay, we've got two triangles. I want you guys to pause the video. Pause the video and try to do these two on your own. Okay, pause the video, try to do these two on your own, and then I'll go over how to do these two so you guys will have them. Okay, I hope you've done, or are done. I hope you pause the video like I told you to. Okay, so starting out, I'm just going to kind of run through these. Okay, opposite of my reference angle. That would be opposite my 90-degree angle, so that's my hypotenuse, which means this is my adjacent. Okay, so what do I know? Well, I know my adjacent and hypotenuse. Okay, so what trig function do I need to use? Adjacent and hypotenuse. So, TOA. Okay, so adjacent hypotenuse tells me I'm using my cosine function. So I've got cosine theta is adjacent over hypotenuse. So I'm going to plug this in. Cosine theta equals my adjacent side is 16 over 20. I've got to use the inverse cosine. Inverse cosine is what eliminates that. Cosine negative 1 of 16 over 20. That gives me theta equals cosine negative 1 of 16 over 20. I'm going to go to my scientific calculator to help me figure out what that is. So cosine, my function, cosine negative 1. Back to our main, 16 over 20. Okay, it gives me 36.8. So 36.8, I would round that up. Round that up, 36.8 is going to give me 37 degrees. So you should have gotten 37 degrees on that one. Okay, next one. Okay, this triangle is kind of flipped around. It doesn't change anything. Across from my 90-degree angle is my hypotenuse. Across from my theta is my opposite. What's left over is my adjacent. Okay, so what do I know? What do I know? Well, I know my opposite and hypotenuse. So if you know opposite and hypotenuse tells me that I need to use my sine theta, which sine theta is opposite over hypotenuse. So I'm going to go sine theta equals opposite, which is 15, over hypotenuse, which is 21. To get rid of the sine, I cannot divide by sine. Remember, I'm using the inverse of sine. That's what allows those to cancel. So I've got sine negative 1 of 15 over 21. So theta equals sine negative 1 of 15 over 21. Okay, I'm going to go to my calculator. And I'm going to do function sine negative 1, back to our main, of 15 over 21. Press enter. 45.5. Okay, so 5 means we round up. So 45.5, that should give me 46. Whoops, got on the wrong one. So my theta equals 46 degrees. Okay. You guys have your homework. There's a front and a back side of it. If you guys have any questions, please email me. Okay, I've been emailing you, so you should have my email. Don't hesitate to ask. Okay, might need to send a picture of the problem so I know what you're talking about. Okay, if you guys have any questions, please email.